What is up, Hype Squad? It's Patricia Hartley, and it's time for your late night hype on this Tuesday, June the 23rd, 2020. And I'm broadcasting live from my studio here in Orlando, Florida. And this is your late night lineup. Up first, we sit with the host and founder of Brown Girl Radiance podcast, LaJoy Mercer. And we tap into our top two entertainment topics of the week, including the stadiums being renamed at two major Florida universities, plus the Juneteenth celebrations all over Central Florida. We then play a friendly game of gospel song association with our guests. Praise the Lord, Saints. And then we wrap it up with our late night hype updates and empowerment quote of the day. And did you know that we were also a podcast? Yep. On March 31st, we officially moved from podcasting to webcasting. But no worries, you can catch all of our past podcast episodes on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/late night hype. Now, please remember that while Late Night Hype focuses on higher education, we're in no way affiliated with any college, technical school, or university. But here at Late Night Hype, we do encourage all of our listeners to reach higher. And we want you to weigh in, Hype Squad. Just use our name, hashtag Late Night Hype, and that's night with a K, and follow us on YouTube for immediate notifications. All right, y'all, the wait is over. Finally, Hype Squad, y'all know what time it is. It's time to get to know the founder of Brown Girl Radiance Podcast. It's a podcast that celebrates the brilliance of women of color through reflective conversations and stories. Welcome, LaJoy Mercer. Welcome to the show, darling.
Thank you so much. I just have to say that I love your energy, and I'm so honored to be part of this.
Well, thank
You
you
have the
so much.
perfect title: hype. You
Hype.
know.
Look, I can definitely. I think that one of my gifts is, encouraging other people and hyping them up and encouraging them in their gifts. And so I love the fact that you took time out to come and be on the podcast, or should I say now webcast. And we can talk a little bit more about your podcast. But before we get into the details of your amazing podcast, I want to talk a little bit about your background because here at the podcast here at Late Night Hype, we do encourage all of our listeners to reach higher. And I know that you've gone to college. So I want to talk a little bit about where you grew up first, and then what was it like growing up there before we even get into the college stuff as well. So tell me a little bit about you.
So I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee, and I will say, since part of your podcast or webcast is about reaching higher, one thing I can say for sure is that I think that was something that was ingrained in me from a young age. I come from a nuclear family, so it's myself and my sister and my mom and my dad. So grew up, I would say, middle class family, and I remember really being in around the fourth grade and talking to my parents about education because I had been accepted into an academic magnet middle school, and I didn't want to go to the school because I was a fourth grader, so I wanted to stay with my friends and go to the school that they were going to, but it ended up being such a huge blessing, and from there from that middle school I went into the academic magnet high school that we have, which is actually one of the top high schools in the U.S. And one fun fact about it, it actually is it's like a historical site, and it's a castle. So that was pretty cool going to school
Oh,
in this
wow.
castle. Yeah, located downtown. The name of the high school is Hume Fogg Academic Magnet School, and I remember so it was in the heart of downtown Nashville. And so way back in the day when the Tennessee Titans went to the Super Bowl, they actually had the Super Bowl parade right on the street where our school was located. And so you could get a note from your parents, and you would, get to go see the parade. So yeah, it was just very cool, very, unique experience. But one thing for sure about the high school is it was all about preparing you for college. We pretty much had 99% to 100% rate of
Success
students who were
rate.
going to college. And even in my family, I grew up in what I would say is an HBCU tradition household. So in Nashville, there is Tennessee State University, and that's where my parents went to school, and as well as some of my aunts and uncles and cousins, et cetera. So, I grew up going to homecomings and all that stuff and being energized by that. And then I have some aunts who went to a small HBCU in Jackson, Tennessee called Lane College. And again, so it was just always around me. And especially living in Nashville, they have so many different universities. So
Yeah.
I named TSU, but there's also Fisk University, which
Yeah.
is another HBCU. The Fisk Jubilee Singers are like world renowned. And then there's also Belmont University, which is like a smaller Christian private school, in Vanderbilt University as well. So growing up there, I was blessed in that I was able to like be a part of, all kinds of different extracurricular and youth programs that actually allowed me to experience all of those different campuses. So like I said, just from a young age, it was always something that I knew, like I knew I was going to college. I'll put it that way.
Wow. And it sounds like you had a very rich experience. One, living where you was. Two, the fact that your family is deep rooted in getting their college degrees. Like that is such a big deal. What was it like being surrounded? And when I say what was it like, not necessarily like what are the conversations like in terms of camaraderie? Is there a lot of, your family like, you need to go to Fisk, oh, you need to go to this university, oh no, baby, this was the best. Like, did you have a lot of that?
Well, it's funny that you should ask that question. So I will, as I answer that question, I will actually shout out where I did go to school, which was on the highest of 7 hills, Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida. So I got my bachelor's and master's in business there. Bam, October 3rd, 1887. So I was blessed to have a full scholarship there. And so growing up, of course, being around TSU, like I'll put it this way, my family or my parents, I'm sure would have loved for me to go to TSU, but I always knew that I wanted to actually get, some experiences outside of the state of Tennessee. And so when I was in high school, when I was a freshman, I remember FAMU actually was voted College of the Year by the Princeton Review in 1997. And so that stayed with me. And then I remembered them coming and recruiting. And so FAMU was always like a top choice for me. And I remember like way back in the day seeing the band during one of TSU's homecomings.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. So I think now I'll put it this way. So my family, I mean, they were proud, they were happy, especially because, I had the full scholarship. And I will also say my sister, she had a full scholarship to Hampton. So, another HBCU. So wow. I think they were probably, more than anything happy that first of all, we had, scholarships, right? And then on top of that, that we were keeping that HBCU tradition. So now I would say there's definitely a lot of those, kind of conversations of teasing, et cetera, TSU, FAMU. So, yeah.
So any traditions in your family with the deep-rooted history in terms of like college, any college traditions that y'all have, like either around Christmas time where y'all wear shirts they represent, y'all have a college bowling, do you have any tradition that's wrapped around just, your alma mater?
Yeah, so growing up, we would always go to homecoming, and that was like such a fun time. We would go to Tennessee State's homecoming, and I remember my family would like come to town for it. So it was always such a fun weekend. We would do the parade. We would, of course, we would get to do all the vendors, and we would go to the game, of course, and and somewhere along the way there would be some good food, so barbecue,
always,
all that,
always,
so right. So it was just it was a really nice time. And my family, I mean, in terms of tradition, so we definitely have that. And then we do get together for Christmas in Jackson, Tennessee, which is where my parents were raised. But we're actually I would say my family is also a big football family. So
okay.
they are they are Cowboys lovers. So
Dallas.
yeah,
That's a good answer
yeah.
for this show. We'll say it like that. That's definitely a good answer for this show. We'll just throw that in there. I'm from Texas, so I'm a Texan. So when you say you lived around like HBCUs, we didn't live very far from Prairie View A&M University, and we always went to the homecomings. It was a tradition in our family to go to all of basically the homecomings. I remember from a young girl being there, watching the band, watching the Prairie View ladies who were dancers do and strut their stuff, the band, hearing them practice early in the morning. There was a season in my mom's life where she was dropping off one of, her friends at Prairie View to go to work early in the morning because they worked in the cafeteria. And I remember hearing the band and being like, oh my God, like it's early. And the band playing. No, I was so shocked because I'm like this little girl hearing the band, like practice. And my mom was like, practice makes perfect. It's I have a different saying now, practice just makes you better. I don't necessarily think it makes you perfect. There's always room for you to grow, but overall it does put you into a position when you're practicing something for an extended period of time. And I gotta give it to HBCU bands, honey. Honey, baby, they be showing up and showing out every single time. They never disappoint. So shout out to HBCU bands. I can hear you before I see you. It's like you got King on the football field. Like that's how much space y'all have in your band. So shout out to all the Black bands around the world, and special shout out to, of course, FAMU, the Rattlers, baby. So were you involved when you were in college, and then what were you involved in and why?
So I was involved in many different things, but I would say, I guess, two of the major things was, first of all, I was elected to the Student Senate, 2-year term. And so that was a huge honor to be able to serve. So I was a junior and senior senator. And so really, really loved writing legislation and et cetera for the school, and being a part of that, that body of other student leaders. It was really cool. It was such a rich experience. And then I also was a part of a Christian organization that put on like different events, basically to give like students an alternative to going to clubs and stuff. So, I mean, we had like Christian DJs, and we would do all like, it could be game night, roller skating. We had spring formals, but pretty much we had events every month. And the name of the organization was called House of Judah. And it was cool because it was actually a collection of all of the universities that are in Tallahassee. So FAMU, FSU, and then Tallahassee Community College. Students from all of those schools, we would get together and we would plan the different events. So yeah, it was really dope, actually.
So fantastic. So when you have an organization that kind of spills over into 3 different institutions, where and when do you determine to host your meetings or host your events? Do you just kind of rotate campuses? Do you have it off campus?
That's a great question. So FAMU actually was the host. We were able to, secure a classroom there. And so we would meet like usually once a week. And FAMU is is the one of all the ones I named. So yes.
Yes, I love it. Shout out to FAMU.
Very supportive. So
So speaking of support and speaking of just kind of how we got in touch with each other, it was through a podcast conference that we went to last year. Shout out to the podcast movement. I want you to tell us a little bit about your podcast. How did you get involved in podcasting? And then what is your podcast? What does it mean to you? I know I got a whole lot of questions at once, but we'll just start with, tell us a little bit about your podcast and how you started it.
So the name of my podcast is Brown Girl Radiance, and it celebrates the brilliance of women of color through reflective conversations and stories. And I honestly, the way that I got started was all from the Lord. Like I woke up one Monday morning, and I'll never forget, I just heard like the Lord say podcasting. And I remember thinking like, okay, I don't know how to do that. And so I literally sat up in my bed and I Googled how to start a podcast. And from there, I started going to, so the library in Orlando, the one downtown, they have a multimedia center called the Melrose Center. And so they have a lot of different resources there. So I started like taking classes there, like fundamentals of, sound engineering and all these different things. And they had a sound booth that you could, utilize for free. All you needed to do was, have a library card. So that's where I started recording episodes. I would bring my laptop and hook it up. And I just had this crazy, so that was in 2018. And what happened is I really, got inspired from watching the Black Panther movie. I saw it multiple times.
Okay.
The double digit years. And I really got inspired by the women of Wakanda. And so from there, I like the idea kind of just grew from me wanting to highlight like all the different themes that were brought out in terms of the women who were represented in that movie, and the different relationships and the images of beauty and all these different factors. And so I from that, again, just by through the Lord leading and being able to, have conversations with different people, that's how I kind of landed upon Brown Girl Radiance, because I realized really what I wanted to do was celebrate Black women, and especially as we see a lot of times in the media, even with what's happening, because we're not always being celebrated the way that we should, and our stories aren't always being put at the forefront. And so I felt like, well, I wanted to be that that platform to be able to share like different women's stories and inspire and really just build a community of women celebrating each other, lifting each other up, and learning and growing and laughing together. So my first season was dedicated to the women of Wakanda. And again, I'm just so thankful I had friends who were willing to come and sit in the sound booth with me and let me interview them, throughout that season. And to be honest, when I first started, I didn't know how to post an episode. I didn't know how to edit. I didn't have any of that, but all I knew was that God gave me this idea. So I wrote out my outline, what I wanted, the different themes, et cetera, what the topics. And then from there, I just started recording. And then my second season, we celebrated Michelle Obama Becoming Book Club, which is an awesome book. I actually have the physical book. I'm sorry.
No, I say yes, it is. Becoming is such a great book.
Yes. So but I listen to like the audiobook as well, because that's just kind of how I'm digesting a lot of books nowadays. But yeah, so we did that for season 2, and that wrapped up actually in March. And so for that season finale, because that was also at the time that COVID, started really infiltrating into our culture and social distancing and all those things. So the name of that particular episode is actually Becoming Amidst COVID. And so we kind of talk about some of the themes and different ways that Michelle Obama actually role modeled leadership through crisis, et cetera. So something I'm definitely very proud of.
Beautiful.
And then my next season, we're going to be celebrating Brown Girls Abroad. And so talking to different women, whether they've worked abroad, lived abroad, or done missionary work. So actually my season opener, spoiler alert, I'm talking to a dynamic young lady who is actually a missionary in Uganda, and she started a school there. So anyway, so that's just my little teaser. You'll definitely have to listen to that. That episode will be coming in July. And in between too, the wonderful thing about podcasting is, you can make it your own and be creative. So along the way, God has given me different ideas. So I've done a devotional episode, and I have some more devotional episodes that I plan to record in the future. I've done bonus episodes. I did an episode basically sharing a poem from Maya Angelou to kind of
Yes,
inspire
I
everybody,
did.
um,
Yeah.
called Pulse of Morning. And then these last couple months, so May and then this month, June, we've been celebrating all of the amazing things that have happened in our culture. And so it's called the Queens and Kings of Quarantine. So we're talking about, I mean, everything that happened, especially,
You
I will
are.
say this. It was prior to all of like the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all of those things that obviously are um, our community, right? We're mourning and we're also being active and we're, pushing change forward and pushing justice forward. But yeah, so those so the fact that we recorded them before all of that, there's definitely a lot of, I guess you can say, like a lot of just joy and levity. And so now
Yeah.
when you listen, it's kind of nice to have that balance for sure. So yeah.
How often do you release an episode?
So usually monthly, but I have, occasionally done more than one episode. Actually, speaking of like podcast movement, back in August, I released 2 episodes. So one was live from Podcast Movement. And then the other episode was actually called The Magic of August 28th. And so you'll have to check those out again. Couple like just bonus episodes that are, topical for that time. And so, so I'll say this, I would love to be able to produce and publish episodes weekly, but being a full-time working woman
Oh
with a
no, I get
career,
what you listen.
I've had to, just be realistic. And so for now it's monthly, but, as the Lord leads, I mean, I'm hoping to be able to gain more frequency, especially if I, at some point am able to do podcasting full time. So
Yes, I love it. I also think that you do a good job of creating a theme for each one of your seasons, and I think that is something not all podcasts do. So shout out to you for that. It's something that is easy to follow along with. Do you still record your podcast in the library, or do you do it somewhere else now that you're in the virtual environment?
great question. So it's funny, during Podcast Movement, one thing that I learned, I went to this session about remote recording because I realized while it's nice to be able to have people, meet me at the library in the sound booth, the reality is if I want to be able to interview more people and really expand my network, if I want to interview, say, Ava DuVernay or Oprah, you see, I'm speaking it into the atmosphere.
Hallelujah.
Then,
Thank you, Jesus.
amen. So I figure I needed to learn how to, like, what's the best tools, et cetera, to record remotely. So
Right.
went to this session, and one of the main recommended tools that they had was Zoom. So back in December, I actually, started recording episodes on Zoom again to, speak to my guests who are located remotely. And so it just kind of tickles me now that how like Zoom has really blown up right now.
Yes.
I mean, I think everybody pretty much knows what it is. So yeah, so right now I'm recording primarily in Zoom, and then I do have a microphone here at my house. So so I'll do like all my voiceovers and stuff like that. I have
Wow.
that I record, using GarageBand directly into to my laptop. So yeah, so
We need to
my own
talk.
little. Yes, girl, we can definitely talk about it. So, and I will say, I mean, I miss the Melrose Center, but obviously with all that's going on, it's not accessible.
Yeah,
So again, I
it's
think that
not.
God just kind of lined up things perfectly such that I'd already started doing Zoom
Yep.
interviews. I already had a microphone, all those things. So it's kind of just like, okay, so now, this is my new normal, right? So, but I'm loving it.
Good. So, what do you think is some startup advice for somebody who's looking to start their podcast? Because you did, it seems like all of your research sort of like from the ground up. So, what advice would you give to somebody wanting to start a podcast? I hear a lot of people want to, but then they don't do it.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say the first piece of it is Well, I always tell people the wonderful thing about podcasting, which you know, Patricia, is that there is room for everyone. Everyone has a voice and it's valuable. And going to that, podcasting conference, I'm sure you
Oh,
met people who had
yes. Oh my
very,
God.
right? Like very niche
Very
subjects,
niche.
etc.
Yeah, yeah.
And so so I would say that, if you have that idea and you have that passion, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of started just like writing it down, like what does it look like, and also being willing to kind of refine what it looks like. But once you are able to determine what it is that you want to put into the universe, what it is that you want to share with the world in terms of, using your voice. And that can be either, it can just be you in the microphone. It doesn't necessarily have to be you interviewing people,
You
but if
and
you want to
somebody
do
else.
that,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah,
It,
exactly. It can be a
it's really
co-host.
more
And
storytelling too now. Like it's a lot of like
it,
storytelling and people kind of breaking it down or doing like soap opera-y kind of stuff. So there's a variety of different genres out there within podcasting, right? These little you know what I'm saying? Like little subsections of niches that's very like unique and just kind of unthought of, and you wouldn't think about it until you go to a podcast conference like the Podcast Movement and you say, oh my goodness, like now I know why this is so popular. Now I know why there are certain people who are able to fund their podcast, how they're able to fund it, how they're able to, add that monetary, portion in it, but then also seeing those people who do it from their heart, knowing that they do it straight from their heart. It has nothing to do with the monetary. And not to say that everybody who has monetary connections with it does it for the monetary purpose. But there's just been some podcasts that I know for a fact are just not getting the um should I say the hype that they deserve, and they're just as good as some of the ones that are hyped up and at the top of the list. So
yeah,
I've kind of went on I've gone on
well,
a rant.
no, that actually, as far as that's concerned, thank you for saying that. I actually wanted to say, I think what I'm learning, while I would love to, to have a sponsor. So if someone's listening, my God,
Let's get this.
thank
Hallelujah.
you in advance. But while it is still a passion project, one thing I realized today, I was actually working on, some podcasting things this morning, and I looked at my podcast statistics, which I try not to get like too caught up in the numbers, but at the same time, I do look at them, once a month, usually. Not that I don't obsess about it again, because I'm really doing it for the love. But I was looking at this one report that allows me to see like the top states and countries where people are listening. And literally, like, the report had 25 different states, right? And some of those states I haven't even been to yet, like Oklahoma, New Mexico. And so it was like, wow. So I realized, again, while I would love the financial, and I pray that comes at some point, the fact that my podcast is going to states and even countries, in some cases that I haven't been to before. Brazil, I've seen, I just, it from month to month, it varies, but it's a blessing that, somebody is consuming something that I've put into the atmosphere. And so I consider that a blessing. So it's like I am going to these places that I haven't been yet. And the fact that someone found value in it to at least, listen to it. Because I do feel like podcasting is kind of a unique relationship, right? Because people are taking time out of their busy lives to actually listen to your voice and listen to those stories, like you said, listen to that
That is so
conversation. And
true.
so what an honor that somebody, finds your voice or your content valuable. So
I agree with that. I do. And I'm so thankful for the feedback that we've received since we've actually transitioned from being on the podcast to being on now a webcast and being on YouTube. So talk to us a little bit about your experience living in Orlando, and then tell us how we can listen to your podcast.
awesome. Okay, so living in Orlando, I would say, I love living here. I've been here for 13 years, and
Oh
so
my God,
um,
have you?
yeah, yeah. So my career, I work for a Fortune 100 company here, so as a research leader, and so. But I will say, I feel like Orlando, there is always something to do, even in terms of just like concerts, different events, cultural things always happening. Obviously,
Always
the
something.
staples of theme parks as well. There's just so many different offerings. Like there's no way that you can be bored. And then I also love that, so many people come. Of course, my family loves to come and visit here, and even just, different people, close friends, as well as some people who, maybe they're more of an acquaintance, but they're in town for some type of conference for work. And then you get to, connect with them over dinner. I love
Agreed,
being
yes.
able to have those types of moments. Right. So, yeah. And, prayerfully, things will continue to recover safely, though. Safely. I don't
Safely,
want
yeah.
us
Not too
opening up
quick, but
too.
at the same time. Right. Agree. I
Yeah.
do agree with that. Now, how can we listen to your podcast?
So my podcast is on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and Castbox. So lots of different ways to consume the content, for sure.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm also going to ask you before we end the show for you to share that again, okay? Along with, of course, your favorite quote. And then we got to play a game. We got to play a game as well.
Okay. And do you want me to give my socials or and all that information yet, or save that for the
Why
end?
don't you go ahead? No, don't save it for later because I'm still going to ask you to recap. Go ahead and say that right now.
So you can connect with me on Instagram at Brown Girl Radiance Podcast, or at Gmail, which is Brown Girl Radiance Podcast at gmail.com. So,
and what I love
would love
about
to hear.
following you is that you always have positive messages, great verses that are great scripture, just always positive things in order to just brighten your day. So that's what I love about following LaJoy and her podcast. And we're going to have a chance to recap on that a little bit later on at the end. Okay.
Sounds
So,
good.
this past weekend was a very special weekend. It was Juneteenth. Everybody was celebrating Juneteenth. Just in case you don't know, it commemorates the end of slavery, specifically in Texas. They didn't find out until 2 years later. I am a Texan, and we've been celebrating Juneteenth for a very long time. Juneteenth has though gained a lot of attention due to peaceful protests around the globe, protesting against racial inequality as well as police brutality. And protests, of course, grew after the killing of George Floyd. One protester this past weekend did remind the audience that although walking in the protests are good, so is showing up to vote. So I'm going to encourage everybody to continue to stay safe. And of course, make sure that you are registered to vote. Shout out to everybody who is out making a change, making a difference, protesting peacefully. Your voice is definitely being heard. So shout out to you for that. Don't let it stop. Make sure you rock the vote, rock the vote, rock the vote. Okay. Somebody.
Yes.
And then in addition to that, there's arenas all over Florida apparently being renamed. I saw this on Twitter, had to bring it on to the show today. An article in the Orlando Sentinel states that former Florida State and the University of Florida students are pushing to rename two of their major sports venues, the Doak Campbell Stadium in Tallahassee and the Stephen C. O'Connell Center in Gainesville, because they currently honor what is considered to be in the news segregationists. The report goes on to say that students and alumni at both schools, have joined a nationwide movement against the racial injustice following the death of George Floyd. FSU's Doak Campbell Stadium has a capacity for more than 79,000 spectators. The stadium is said to be the largest structure constructed out of bricks in the United States. That's an interesting fact. Well, students and alumni at both schools have joined a nationwide movement against the racial injustice following the death of the student, as I said, not of the student, I'm sorry, of George Floyd, as I stated before. So there's more to come about what is going to happen in terms of the renaming of those stadiums. Will that actually pass, or will they change it? There's definitely more to come. It's a lot of schools that's dealing with some very challenging topics as it relates to race, and they're having to really face and have some of these hard conversations. And what I'm loving is that it's not a just black matter. It has become a what it always should have been a humane and humanitarian problem. Like, you should treat individuals with kindness and respect no matter who they are. And it's just unfortunate that those of the darker hue is always and always have been around the globe, not even just in the United States, treated just differently. You know, if the darker your skin is, it seems like the more you're hated. And that is so it's just so hurtful. It's hurtful. And when people see anger specifically from Black people, it's a pain. It's not an anger that you see. It comes from this place of just pain. And so I'm so looking forward to the change that this will have across the globe, not just in the United States. All right. And so moving right along, it's game time. You know, let's get into some games. Okay. It's game time.
Hey.
Of course, game time is our brand new segment. Here we get to play a game with our guests to get to know you a little bit better. Now, it's called Gospel Song Association, but I did not invent the game. So I got this game off of YouTube, and I believe it's a magazine that plays it all the time, but they don't play Gospel Song Association. They play just Song Association. So technically, I made it my own, but I'm still referencing y'all just in case you watching me. And if you are, how you doing? Um, Remember what I'm going to be doing in terms of Gospel Song Association. How you play the game is I'm going to give you 10 seconds, and I'm also going to give you a word. With that word, your goal is to sing a gospel song that includes that word. You have 10 seconds to do it. Got it?
As long as
All
you
right.
forgive, like, I can't guarantee, what's going to come out, but yes, forgive me
Okay.
in advance.
Okay, I will. First word is Jesus.
Jesus, you're the reason why I sing.
Okay, Jesus. Okay, you knew that one pretty quick. That was like 8 seconds because you had it on your mind and your heart. All right, finish it. Listen 5. I know. Okay, you ready? So the next word, 10 seconds, is mighty.
You are a mighty God, mighty God.
Okay, I forgot to
I may
start
have made
counting.
that up. I may have made
I
that
was
one up, but I feel like
Listen, I know somebody with a studio. Don't be just making up songs and not getting paid, because that's definitely an area where we can get you paid. And just to let you know, I know that gospel is probably more up your alley, but secular, where you can't really tell whether it's gospel or not, that's the popular kick. And what you just said, mighty, we can throw that in. See, that's a sinner in me. Don't support that. Don't support that. That's the devil. All right. So the next word is glory. Glory.
we give you all the glory. We worship you, our Lord. You
Okay.
are worthy to be praised.
I don't
Yeah,
know that one. Who sings that? Do you know who sings that?
that's Israel Houghton.
Oh, the one that's married to okay, I know her from the real. Okay, Adrian
Yeah,
Bailon. Okay,
yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
the next word is the next word is possible. Possible.
All things are possible. Nothing's impossible. He's still doing miracles. It's happening now.
You ready? You ready? If he came back today, I think you go. You'd be right up there. All right. And the last and final word is holy. Holy.
Holy, holy, Lord God Almighty.
I love it. Thank you so much for playing our Gospel Song Association game.
That
I
was
appreciate
fun.
it. See, that filled my heart. Speak to my heart. I gotta learn some more church songs because I
Holy
literally only knew like one.
Spirit.
I love that song. Yep. Be your word to encourage. Yep, that's about all I know. I gotta start playing
Question
more
for you.
of. Yes.
Question for you. Did you happen to catch the Kirk Franklin and Fred Hammond Instagram battle that was like a healing? If you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube, girl. It's so good.
Okay.
You will
I
be
need to go
taken to
find
church.
it.
And
Okay.
Yes. And they also have a Spotify playlist, but that was church.
I got to see some of the clips, but I did not watch it live. And I know that I missed the treat because it came at the most perfect time. And it was like the world needed that moment of just like, stop, just gather yourself for a minute and just let's praise the one who is responsible for all of us, for all of this. So it was, yes, I got to watch it. Now you inspiring me. I feel like we need to pray. Everybody bow your head. Like, I feel like we just need to, hello, okay. You got my spirit up. I may have to invite you again. So thank you again for being on the show, LaJoy. It has been a pleasure and a joy having you on. And thank you all for your support during our transition. So glad that we took this leap forward to finally get onto YouTube. And since you're in love with the hype, leave us a review and do not forget to subscribe to our channel so that you never miss a beat. Join us this upcoming Saturday for our next staff spotlight. And thank you again, LaJoy, for being a guest on the show. Remind our audience once again, how can they keep in touch with you?
Thank you again for having me. We can stay connected on Instagram at Brown Girl Radiance Podcast or via email at browngirlradiancepodcast@gmail.com.
Love it, man. So now my other thing is I wanted you to tell me one of your favorite quotes. So I don't want to leave out without you getting a chance to tell our audience what is one of your favorite quotes and who is it by?
Well, I will have to go to the scripture and say one of my favorite. So one of my favorite quotes is actually our verses is John 10:10, which says, "I have come that they may have life and have it more abundantly."
Okay, I know that scripture from somewhere. My mom is a Sunday school teacher, so I know she know it. But like my mama say, she can't know it for me. I got to know it for myself. So I got to get my life together. But I love that quote. And thank you again for sharing it. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to just be here with me. The quote that I have that I'm going to leave you with is, be a woman who fixes another woman's crown without telling the world it is crooked. I don't know who said that, but when I send it out in the newsletter, I'll be sure to put the individual who did state that quote. All right. Remember, you can catch us weekdays every Tuesday night on YouTube. And thank you so much for your continuous support since our March 2016 debut. Do not forget to give us your input, Hype Squad. Leave us a comment below. And do not forget to subscribe and thumbs up this video. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter using the social media handle #LateNightHype. Tune in next time for another episode of Late Night Hype. Good night.